Welcome to the newest episode of Beatin' and Bangin'. I'm your host, Kyle Dalton. We have multiple news items to talk about in today's video, including NASCAR officials commenting on a confusing Chase Elliott penalty from Sunday's race at Michigan that was rescinded, Brad Keselowski commenting on a confusing penalty he received that wasn't rescinded. Plus, we have Denny Hamlin talking about his upcoming trip to Mexico and why it might not happen, Joe Logano talking about his concerns for the upcoming trip south of the border, and something I can totally sympathize with. And another Logano item, which is one of those incredible stories you just have to see and hear to believe. And we'll wrap up with our By the Numbers segment. However, before we start crunching the numbers, let's go back to yesterday and the appearance of NASCAR Cup Series Managing Director Brad Moran on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio, where he talked about the penalty that Chase Elliott received in Michigan for equipment interference. Here's what Moran had to say about it.
There was a call that I wanted to ask you about. The 9 car and Chase Elliott had a penalty, and then it was rescinded. Can you give a little context of what went on with that call?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the original call come up. Obviously, we have our pro trailers. We have all our officials in the pro trailer. Chad Little sits beside me up in race control, and he manages the pro trailer and pit road penalties. It was called up. We reviewed it like we do. It looked like a equipment interference because it did catch the hose of the 4 car, I believe it was, in front of them, and that would be an interference call, which was called. Further review, we looked at it, and really the issue was the tire was heading back. The hose from the 4 was in the 9 box, which is common, but that's what the wheel caught. That's what the tire caught. So really it wasn't even out of his box or in a penalty zone. So really kind of odd circumstance, but that one would be pretty hard to penalize the 9 for something that was within his own box.
So that was NASCAR admitting that they got a penalty wrong and fixed it, which takes us to the next story. And that was a comment made yesterday on X by Brad Keselowski on a speeding penalty he received on Sunday. The RFK Racing driver co-owner responded to a fan calling his penalty trash. Still not sure how we got speeding penalty from Sunday. Our in-car telemetry showed 59.4 miles per hour, where NASCAR system showed 60.9 miles per hour. To which Todd Gilliland responded, "I got one right in front of you at the same time by a lot. Didn't even think I was close." And Keselowski replied, "Really weird deal. I have reached out to NASCAR asking, as the case was with Elliott, if they might have got this penalty wrong because their pit road calculations might have been off. I have not heard back. I'll keep you posted if I do." Moving on to our next story, Denny Hamlin appeared yesterday on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio. He talked about winning the race on Sunday at Michigan, and then he was asked about the baby watch for his first son that's going on and how it might affect him going to Mexico.
Yeah, I mean, I said from the very beginning, if she hasn't had it, by the time I need to leave for Mexico, then I'm not going to go to Mexico. I think that that's the proper thing to do. But really just letting her call the shots. I think that's the best thing. And, when she, her body and her mind says that it's time, then that's what we'll do. And ultimately I need to be there for her, during, post, and all those things. So, just going to make sure I spend the proper time with her, and obviously the racing will come second this week.
Good for Denny. As a father of 3, that's the right call. Speaking of Mexico, our next story comes to us from yesterday's Behind the Wheel segment with Joey Logano on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio, where he talked about the plans for the drivers and teams for this weekend's races in Mexico. I wanted to share it with you guys because I thought it was really interesting to hear him kind of break down what they are expected to do and how it differs from their regular weekly trips to all of the racetracks that they're familiar with. Listen to this.
Quite the logistical situation for a lot of people, a lot of unknowns this weekend, right? The truckers, they're going down right now, through Mexico. So I could only imagine what that's like for everybody. Like, I don't know. I'd be nervous, driving the trucks through there. Like, you don't know. It's the unknown, right? Like, it's just trying to go along. The good thing is they're all together, right? And there's, everyone can support each other throughout that, I'm sure. So, and I'm sure there's a great plan for how all that works. But even the way we get down there, right? I mean, it's so different than what we typically do, right? Typically, we just go to the airport, we jump on the plane, we land, our rental cars are there, you drive to the racetrack, boom. Like, it happens every single week the same way. It's very, very simple. Now it's like, okay, we're going to meet at the shop. We're going to ride a bus down to the airport. We're all getting in the big airplane all together, and we're going to land, and there's different buses. Make sure you get on the bus. Make sure your bag gets on the bus. Make sure you go to the right hotel. Like, oh, and like, what if we don't? You know, what if we get in the wrong place?
See ya.
You know, like, what's it like when we get there? You know, you hear great things, but you also hear the bad things that go along with it, and you're like, boy, like, what do we do? You know, and what to eat, what not to eat. Don't get sick. Like, what happens if I do? Altitude, right? Like all this different things that's going on. Oh, and it's going to rain. Like, oh, cool. I don't know if I've gone into a weekend with this many unknowns outside of the race itself. You know, like typically, like, okay, there's a lot of questions about the race, but I have just as many, if not more, questions about the process of getting there and what to do, like the what ifs. So, yeah, that's just what this weekend's about, though.
Did you hear him talk about getting sick and what happens if I do? So I'm not sure if you saw my video from last year when my wife and I had the awesome opportunity to go to Cancun with Raising Cane's, including a private beach concert with Snoop Dogg. You can go check out that video here. It was an absolute blast, but I got really sick to my stomach, and I was really deliberate in not drinking the water, not even using the tap water to brush my teeth, but bottled water, and I still got sick. I later found a website that talks about getting sick in Mexico, and it just so happened that the resort we were staying at didn't have a good track record, and lots of people had gotten sick there in the past. So I'm wishing all of the drivers and the teams best of luck this weekend, because if I'm being honest, had I not had that experience last year in Mexico, I would have definitely gone to this year's race. It's a cool event, but that experience last year honestly soured me and my stomach. Now, moving on to our next story, but sticking with Logano and going back to Sunday's race. Remember Alex Bowman's nasty hit? I wanted you to hear what Logano said about it, and the reason I wanted you to hear it is because he shared some detailed information I hadn't ever really heard before about the impacts in the Gen 7 cars and how it affects the drivers. Take a listen.
I don't know. I haven't talked to Alex since, but when you see something like that, you know, my first thought these days is, how's his back? For two reasons. One, that compression of moving forward. NASCAR has taught us that a lot of times, like, your seat is a little bit clamshelled, if you will. So when you wreck and your pelvis comes up and the belts are pushing you down, you get compression fractures. And that's been a thing that's been happening. So you're nervous of that. But then you also see the back of the car come up and then slam back down, and there's compression fractures that way as well. So you see all that and you're like, oh my God, like his back is toast. I haven't talked to him, but he got out. Like he said he was okay, which is incredible. So whatever they've done to their seats and their setup inside the car, to also obviously with the car and the crushing and all that stuff helped too. But their seat setup must be right, you know, if he was fine there, because there's wrecks that we've seen here recently that are comparable, maybe. That one looked harder to me, that had injuries. So probably some key learnings there for all of us, you know, in the industry, of saying, like, how did he have everything mounted? You know, like it's worth us studying what they did because it worked.
When Logano described all of that, I couldn't help but think of Bowman's history. You remember it was 2 years ago in April when he broke his back in that sprint car accident. So hearing him say that made me think that Bowman's back might have been in jeopardy. From an appearance by Jeff Gordon on SiriusXM yesterday, it sounds like the number 48 driver will be good to go this weekend in Mexico. And our last story from Logano from that same appearance yesterday has to be one of the most unbelievable stories I have ever heard from a NASCAR Cup Series driver. I'm not even going to try to tease it. I'm just going to let you hear what Logano had to say about his water car.
I sold the water car. I've had this thing for years, and it was awesome when so I-77 that runs from, you know, Charlotte to Mooresville, and the race shops in Mooresville, used to be a complete disaster. And it still is, but there's a toll lane now. But what I used to do is just I would be going on the highway and be like, oh, there's a lot of traffic. I'd peel off. I'd dump the car into the lake. I'd drive up Lake Norman. I'd pop up on some random boat ramp that I seen.
Are you serious?
I'd jump back on, and I'd jump back in and drive to the shop. And I would literally save time with this vehicle. And like, this is the most practical car in the world. Who's better than me? Like, I thought it was great. And people would look at you like you're crazy because you just drive it. You literally drive straight into the water and wheels will pull up, and you pull off and you go 40 miles an hour across the water. Like, you can rip. And it was cool. And then I just found myself not driving it that much anymore. And I just think, I don't know, if I'm not going to drive it, what's the point of owning things if you don't use them? It's just taking up space. And then if you don't drive things a lot, when they sit there, it's always something. And when you do want to go, something's wrong, and it just doesn't fire it up because it's been sitting for 3 months, and like, so I'm just like, I'm over that. I'm sick of it not working. So we got it running and said, all right, we're going to sell this thing. So we sold it. But we took it out for one more ride. That was the Netflix doc. So that was the farewell tour. The last time we put it in the water before I sold it.
Several things. A, it must be nice to be able to buy things like that. B, as Joey said, it is so practical. And C, the fact that he did it is so cool. You could tell by Mike Bagley and Pete Pistoni's reaction that they weren't sure if what he was saying was true. And I know I didn't include it in Logano's quote, but he did say he kind of had some seller's remorse after getting rid of the car because it was such a cool way to avoid traffic. And now it's time for our By the Numbers segment. And this week we're going to start with our last 5 races analysis. Ross Chastain won at Charlotte in the Coca-Cola 600, but as you can see here, dating back to his runner-up at Texas, he's been pretty solid in his last 5 and leads the way with an average finishing position of 7.6. He's followed by Christopher Bell, who has a runner-up result of his own at Kansas and has been just as steady in his last 5 with 4 top 10s. Joey Logano struggled at Michigan but has 3 top 10s in his last 5, including his win at Texas, and is in third at 10.6. He's followed by Kyle Larson, who has 4 top 10s in his last 5 with that ugly 37th place finish at Charlotte right in the middle. And Chris Buescher is 5th at 12.8 with a pair of top 10s. Rounding out the top 10 are Chase Elliott, a surprise in Eric Jones, who outside of his 32nd at Kansas has been solid in his last 5, William Byron, Chase Briscoe, and Kyle Busch, who you can see in his last 5 how he's steadily been improving. Based on this trend, Rowdy fans should expect the top 5 this weekend in Mexico. Others of note include Bubba Wallace, whose last 5 is wild with 3 straight DNFs followed by 2 strong runs at Nashville and Michigan. And then look at the bottom there. Alex Bowman is second from last with an AFP of 28.2 in his last 5. That 5th place at Kansas, the only reason he's not at the very bottom behind Cody Ware. And now let's take a look at this week's race progression graphs from Michigan, starting with our top 5 finishers. If you saw Monday's race recap video, I documented Ty Gibbs' up and down day, starting in the top 10, plummeting in that first stage where he let his team know about it, then bouncing back and earning his second top 5 of the season. As you can also see, Chris Buescher and Kyle Larson had days where they were running in the mid-20s during the middle of the race, but finished strong. When it comes to teams, as we already talked about with Bowman, he had a rough day in the Irish Hills after that massive hit. William Byron is an interesting one because he led a race-high 98 laps, but had to make a late pit stop for fuel and fell all the way to 28th. Chase Elliott had a roller coaster of a day, but still finished inside the top 15. For those keeping count, the 2020 champ still hasn't finished outside the top 20 all season. Speaking of drivers who ran up front and dropped at the end, we have to take a look at Spire Motorsports, and you can see Carson Hocevar's day where he steadily made his way up to the front, only for that flat left rear tire in the end with 19 to go to ruin his day. Michael McDowell was on the same roller coaster as Chase Elliott and finished 30th, while Justin Haley finished 21st. I don't think I've heard a lot of folks talk about it, but Brad Keselowski, who hadn't scored a top 10 all season, has scored a pair in the last 3 races, including a 10th on Sunday in Michigan. It was a strong day for RFK as a whole, with Buescher finishing 2nd and Ryan Preece finishing 9th for his 6th top 10 in 2025. And we'll wrap up with Team Penske and the Wood brothers. You can see all cars qualified decently inside the top 15, stayed there through the first stage, but only one, Josh Berry, finished inside of it at 12th, which is a nice little lead into our biggest movers of the day. I didn't bring up Trackhouse Racing in our race progression graphs because you can see it here how they were 2 of the top 5 biggest movers surging on Sunday, with Chastain gaining 14 spots and finishing 6th, while Daniel Suarez was the biggest mover overall for the day, picking up an impressive 21 spots and going from 35th to 14th. The 2 RFK cars of Keselowski and Preece, as mentioned, had strong days, as did Eric Jones, gaining 11 spots. Conversely, those trending in the wrong direction were some big names. including the biggest decline of the day coming from William Byron, who dropped 24 spots on that late fuel stop. Pole sitter Chase Briscoe was second worst, dropping 22 spots and finishing 23rd, while Alex Bowman and Austin Cindric tied, both losing 20 spots on the day. Ryan Blaney also found himself on a chart no one wants to be on and dropped 19 spots. I'm betting after this weekend, several of these guys won't be in this chart based on their ability to turn right and left. All right, guys, that's a wrap on today's episode. I want to hear what you think about it all. First, let me know what you guys think about the penalties to Brad Keselowski and Todd Gilliland for speeding, and Chase Elliott's penalty that got rescinded. Did Brad Moran's explanation make sense? And what do you think of Denny Hamlin's decision to stay home if their son isn't born before the time to leave for Mexico on Thursday? And I want to hear what you guys think about Joey Logano's comments on Alex Bowman's hit and his concerns going to Mexico. But I'm really curious to hear what you think about his water car. Were you as fascinated by it as I was? And lastly, let me know what you think about this week's By the Numbers segment and any numbers that particularly got your attention. Thanks again for checking out the latest video and supporting the channel. I really and truly appreciate it and hope you have a great rest of your day.